Okay, good evening, guys. I wanted to get out this weekend before we get started in the week, or even if you see it tomorrow, my fund of funds along with Ulti, right? The three unique funds from YIELDMAX and give you an estimate. Okay, two of them are fairly straightforward. There's some other YouTubers that do them, and that's fine. What I wanted to do was just explain for newbies. You guys that know it already know this, so I'll move through it fairly quickly. You know, the old saying, just get to the payment, Bruce, yet other people love the details. So my only details are how they're calculated. Okay. So let's jump into that. So how does YMAG determine what it pays? Well, it's fairly simple. They own 20 of the funds. And by the way, when they own a fund, they wait for it to have a distribution and then move up to usually the second one. So you don't see Snowy in here yet, even though they kind of weren't expected to pay, but they paid. So what YIELDMAX does in YMAX, it owns all the single stock funds with the exception of the inverse fund. So it doesn't own Crash because Dips is forthcoming. The inverse is supposedly in July for NVIDIA is the underlying, and the one for Coinbase and for Coney is Fiat. So those inverse funds are coming, and I suspect, I think Jay referenced this at some point, that there would be a fund of funds ultimately when they have enough inverse funds, right? If people are bearish on the market, it makes sense to sort of distinguish those because clearly they will put more of those out there. They're also, as I mentioned before, a way to hedge with the caveat they can get capped on the downside pretty much the same way that the bull long stocks can get capped with that weekly and big up moves. Although they do buy, it's kind of interesting, they do buy a little nuance. They do buy a long call way out of the money, sort of because in theory it's infinity, so they want to protect that upside, right? If you sell a put and the thing just goes up thousands of thousands, whereas you know if you buy a put, there's a limited way that it can go down. It can go to zero, but on the upside, it can go up many, many multiples. So without getting into that technical, okay, so what do? You go back at X dividend, right, on the close going into X dividend, and you look at how many shares of these individual funds do they own. Well, I got to tell you, the share count, I went in and looked at some of the stats. I didn't want to do it everywhere, but like Netflix, they increased their share count 30%. So it's 1.3 times as many shares as they had before. On NVIDIA, it's like 112. Some of these things it's higher, like 150, 160. So it's their formula for buying into these funds, and then this ends up being the percentage. So for someone like me that wants to be predictive, I simply just add all of the share counts that they own. Okay, so that tells me, and then we know by default what they pay out, right? So we simply, that's why them being coming after the payouts at sort of the end of the first week, beginning of the second week. They declare on the third, and then they'll pay us tomorrow, right on the 8th. But we know what those payments are, and then we know how many shares they own. Well, there's only one small caveat on top of that. How many shares are outstanding of YMAX, right? So as of the July 3rd end of the day, and this looks like it's the same for the 5th, there were 13,200,000. So as you guys know, on the single stocks, if Misty comes out and says they're going to pay 303 and it's the third, you have all day today on the third. I'm just giving you an example. You have all day to buy that before ex dividend is the next day, right? So people can flood in based on how much they want to get paid. Now, there's the argument for people to wait on ex-dividend. And again, that's a gamble. I think Steve-O, SoCal Steve-O, did a great video, shout out to him, on is it better to buy on ex-dividend date or before? And you know what? The results are mixed. There's a hair advantage of buying an ex-dividend. But wouldn't you know it, for the guy who goes in on ex-dividend and thinks he's getting a bargain, and the thing opens and runs massively higher. And when you drip in some of these funds, they determine the timing on the buy-in. So even if I'm going to drip, I'd rather do it myself. I know some of you just want passive, passive, passive. Maybe you're working, you're making big money, and you want your money to grow. I get it. Not everybody has time for that. All right, so let's get into it. So 15.38 distributed over the share count. So again, some other YouTubers kind of blow it, I think, by going out and trying to say, well, over 30 days, there's, 1% buy into the fund. So there's 5 more, 6 more trading days. I'm going to take that. And then when they realize they missed the mark, they put a fudge factor. Look, it's great. You got to do it some way or another. I'm not a magician. I don't magically get it. But I don't use the daily. Why would I use daily yield? Why don't you go back and use prior months, how much was bought in the fixed amount of time? And so that's kind of what I do and what I will do this month. And then I can fudge it. Again, these are guesstimates. I seem to hit ulti the last 2 times pretty close, so I know my fan base has really come out and always wants to see my ulti. But guys, anybody can predict ulti. We try and do it in an educated way, and I'll tell you that. So anyway, to jump back to my prediction sheet, let me tell you what I've got. Okay, so I don't want to run this forever and go into, you guys don't care. You want to know kind of how we got it, so we didn't just pull it out of the air, but I don't think you care about every nuance. So let me jump in here. I've got YMAX, okay, and again, I give you a range. The smart way is to give you a range. Well, it says if they buy the heck out of YMAX, I mean, it could go as low as 60 cents. But right now, it's showing 73.87 with the 13.2 million shares based on the 15 million or whatever sorry, that's not the right math, but whatever the number is, right? 15.38 on the shares, sorry, so 9,751,000, right? You got a share count, you got how much you're paid. So 9,751,383. That's not going to change. But when you divide it by 13.2, you get 0.7387. So that's what's vulnerable. If nobody bought into the shares, then it would stay close to 74 cents. But as people buy in, it dilutes, right? The good news is those guys are owners for the share count going forward next time, right? So what's kind of obvious is YMAX didn't perform as well. And surprisingly, even though if this was based on Tesla and NVIDIA, then it would be paying a lot more money in YMAG, right? Because those two did pretty well along. Oh, Misty's not really in it, right? But some of your funds, even though the money has been flowing in the Mag 6 and Mag 7, again, look at the S&P 500 and look at the percentage growth in the last few months, and in particular, even the last few weeks. You'll have a day where the Magnificent Seven is up 0.35, 0.37%. And you look at the S&P 500 and it's down 0.35, right? Because those 493 other stocks aren't drawing the kind of money. Well, there's something wrong in the market. Never in the history of the market have 6 stocks dominated the S&P to the extent 34% of the entire cash flow, market cap, and everything is constituted in 6 of these big companies. And now out of the Mag 7, Tesla's waking up, right? So something's got to give, and what it'll eventually give is that the Russell 2000 and the rest of the S&P 500 will slowly start to gain. Now, another thing that could happen is we get a 15% pullback or 20% pullback in the markets, and what are they going to hit along with everything else? They're going to hit the Mag 7 and everything, but the ones that might recover at a greater rate might be those that are undervalued. Right? Not to say that people wouldn't dive back in to the NVIDIAs and the Teslas and the Facebooks and the Googles and everything, because it's proven over time that these big indexes will perform. The other thing, they're smart. If there's a sector like commodities that I'm bullish on, you watch the S&P over the next 8 years, they'll start to have oil, they'll start to have agriculture. Not to say that they don't have some now. So that's why these index averages can ultimately perform, but the specific commodity index may go up 6 times over the next 8 years, and the S&P might go up 2, right? I'm just throwing out examples and not giving you an actual prediction. So anyway, I'm done now telling you and educating you on some things. So I've got this. So here's what I did. I took the midpoint, guys. And if I see more buy-in early, then I'll come back in a couple days and I'll say this is trending towards 63. And if it's trending towards 60, it may get there. But so right now I'm giving you an estimate of the midpoint. I'd love to just pick one, right? I could go safe and say 60 cents, but it comes in at 64. It looks like a miss. I'd rather just tell you. And the same thing on YMAG. It has a 60 to 81 cent range. They both have about 13 cents, okay, which is up in the 20 or more percent, because that's what happens with the flow. But I got to tell you, this is dropping below 40% for the first time. But also look at the yield, right? Or sorry, that is the yield, but look at the price. So this constitutes what I was telling you. The Magnificent Seven, the reason they're holding this up almost 10% above the buy-in price, 4 or 5 months ago, is because the money flow so far. But again, it's like looking in the rearview mirror and expecting that you're going to see what's in front of the car. For a while, it works till it doesn't work, right? And this yield is actually lower because this price is higher. They're paying more money, so you got to consider that, right? So to me, this is still the safer bet. Why do I say that? Because it's across pharma, it's because payment systems, it's got Bitcoin, it's a general index across a bunch of funds. I wouldn't get fooled by these guys, right? Because at some point the NASDAQ will pull back. Not to say it may pull back in conjunction with the entire market, or it may spread out to the Russell and the rest of the S&P. Okay, guys, and then I'm going to give you Ulti. Okay, how do I predict Ulti? Oh, Ulti is the wild child, the stepchild, right? So I got 66 and 73 for the respective 7-fund stock and 20-fund stock currently, because it's the midpoint, right? It's halfway between what's now, and I should put this the other way, right? Well, actually, the smaller to larger, yeah. And so I've got 103, and let me just tell you, let's take a look quickly at the funds, okay? They've been holding ARM for a long time. AST Mobile they've had for a while. So how does this fund operate? Why I even call it the wild stepchild. Well, first off, it doesn't use long stock synthetic and write a naked call like all the single stocks do, except for Crash, which is an inverse, right? So they do the opposite on their synthetic, and they sell instead of buy on their naked. And it's, and they do have something unique on that one. They buy a long call because they don't want it to run so high and so far that it really hurts them. So they go a long call way out of the money. So they have to spend a little cash. And it's actually, I understand that strategy. It makes sense. All right. So Kava, CleanSpark. Guess what CleanSpark is? BTC miner. The only thing I don't like about Ulti is that they're so BTC focused. I'm bullish on BTC. I own YBIT, I own Coney, I own Misty, but I don't want a concentrated position then in buying an Ulti. I actually own a couple hundred shares of Ulti, but it's easier to own a little bit when you're reporting on it. I watch it more that way. I have an interest, and it's sometimes hard for me to report on something I just don't believe in, right? I mean, to report on JP Morgan just would bore the heck out of me. Um, I love oil, but even Zomo bores me, right? There's a lot better oil plays for dividend. There's some 15, 17, 18% yielders, right? It's a good solid company. And when oil takes off in the future, it'll do well. But for now, I'm bored. Carvana, right? Um, all of these are variants. You got pharmaceutical, you got insurance, him and hers, you got personal health care, right? This is just cash, why I made it green. Another miner, right? Owns a lot of Bitcoin. So when you start looking across here, there's 5 or 6 BTC related, right? This is a, chat group. Reddit, right? They had their IPO not too long ago. Up and coming, definitely there. Solar, right? Supermicro, they're an integrator. They provide a lot of components to the AI hardware companies, in particular NVIDIA, and they do it for many others. And that stock has a super high IV, right? They've all come down. They own Tesla. I like to see that. For a while, they didn't own both Coinbase here and MicroStrategy. They were only owning MicroStrategy. But again, if I look at it for me as adding a lot, if you want a cross section of Bitcoin and crypto, then certainly buy in. But no, this is an outsized percentage. Why? Because they want relatively high IV. Zim, I like Zim. Zim is an Israeli international shipping company. They're known for having a high yield. So normally, I don't think, Ulti cares about the yield. They just want high IV. And this, if I didn't say it, this is a true covered call fund, not like, oh, it's a covered call strategy where they have no covered calls. They have naked calls. And they refer to them as a covered call strategy on the synthetic, which is true. But for me personally, I wouldn't use covered call. These are all covered calls. They own the underlying. All right, guys, I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. I think that's enough on the prediction. Here's something I need to tell you. So you must buy, okay, 7/16 is the declaration date. All right. 7/17 is the X date. If you buy on 7/17, you will not get the distribution. Buy on 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and on 15, right? So you've got 5 trading days this coming week, and you got Monday the 15th. So what happened? YIELDMAX will, on the evening of the 15th, preparing for the early pre-market morning, they'll announce on the 16th. You can buy all day on the 16th, right? But we will know based on the share count. So every few days I'll update. It's not necessary to do it every day. And, and quite honestly, it's probably going to vary somewhere between 66 and 60, right? I think it'll definitely have shares bought to take it down from, the 80, sorry, this one is here. Whoops, I've got too much here. I copied the wrong one. This should be, sorry guys, I just caught that. This should be 66. I was copying and moving. So you have a 13-cent, 14-cent range here, and you have similar here. So the point is, by dipping down in this one and going in the middle of the range for YMAG and going in the middle of the range here, that's somewhere accurate. We'll know as they buy more shares, as you guys go out there and say, yeah, I want that yield, right? And I want to buy it, then it could go lower. So to me, the bottom of YMAG is around 66 and the bottom of YMAX is around 60. Could they go a penny more? Sure. Lower? So Ulti again, 103. Now, just to clarify that, they were like, what were they? Here we go. 113, 127, 141, 106. Well, why am I 103? Well, first off, most of their assets that they own are down. Secondly, look at the price of the fund. It continues to decline. And there's fear out there, and Max probably is aware of that this could reverse split. But we're probably talking $7, $8. So if Bitcoin doesn't keep going down, since they've got 5 or 6 funds that trade with sympathy with Bitcoin, and then they have a variety, but again, they've been pulled down. They were pulled down when Bitcoin was still moving up and owning those, right? So let's see what happens there. But I went 103. They could easily pay 95 only here. But I think with the fact that the price is low, again, though, by paying $1.03 on a 13.9, what was it in the 15s or 16s last month when they paid $1.13, right? They're always targeting a yield. I think the yield was in the 80s, or it may even been 91. I don't have it in front of me. So that's what I can tell you guys. I don't see a reverse split right now, but could it be in the cards? Absolutely, it always can be if your NAV keeps going the wrong way. But people do chase yield. No matter what we say, you chase yield. Okay, guys, so that's what I got. I got a midpoint of 66 for YMAX. Okay. YMAX, a midpoint of 66 between the 60 and 73. I got a midpoint here of 73 cents for YMAG. And I got a 103 prediction because we don't care about the share count, right? It doesn't change. I mean, it doesn't impact it like it does on the other ones because they actually got paid from them. Okay, guys, this is Bruce out. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Have a great week ahead. Okay, bye.